Welcome to Doctor's Choice's Rules for Scoring the 1800s. This module is specifically going to talk about the rules that govern how to score these OASIS items. The role of the 1800s is several. They establish the need for services. They are also part of value-based purchasing, which we just discussed. They determine the proper amount of reasonable and necessary therapy by assigning an F score, either an F1, an F2, or F3. They contribute to the payment of services rendered, but they also help establish the plan of care for therapy based on the OASIS-driven data. Keep in mind, therapists must always focus goals being addressed towards function. Strength and range of motion, though are important, are not the primary emphasis for Medicare. Medicare wants to see patients showing improvement on grooming, dressing, bathing, walking, etc. The therapy assessment tool is in every home folder, and its intent is for therapists to use this tool to answer the 1800 questions, as they will be assessing these items during their evaluation. This tool can be used for many purposes, including recording balance scores such as the tug, as well as writing some history down as you're assessing the patient. This information will be used to report in the Kinzer 1800 reporting section. In Kinzer, along with an evaluation, an 1800 report will be issued. It has a 1900's, which basically tells us the prior level of function. It also has the 1800's listed based on the therapy assessment tool. All the therapist needs to do is enter the number next to the appropriate measure, and then on the 1900, just use the key listed above in order to score that properly. This information will help the office to determine the proper F score, and it also helps to establish a good baseline for where the patient should be from the beginning. So let's take a look at the rules for scoring the 1800s. So let's take a look at two of the most important rules to consider. The first one is all 1800s should be scored only before interventions. Do not score them after you've given them any type of help at all, and help could be environmental, physical, or verbal. Why is this important? Because the OASIS initially is telling us what is the bottom line, what is the baseline of this patient before you provided services. They're not asking once you start giving services. So if you have a patient that you start evaluating, and as we evaluate, we often give instructions, which is the proper thing to do. But what was the real initial reading? Because if I told that person to scoot to the edge of this chair, giving them a verbal cue, I've now started to treat them. So it's not a proper scoring to score them after that treatment has begun, because you will devalue the service being provided. You won't be able to get credit for the service that you have initiated with this patient. So you must score before any type of intervention is given. Secondly, safety, safety, safety. Safety is integral to ability. This is the most misunderstood concept in the scoring, because what does it really mean? Well, safety means you need to score them where they're free from any risk or any bit of harm at all from the activity. And you score them at the current level, or you score them where you would place them to be at a safe level of function. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean they're actually doing that, because you have to score them based on what places them in a condition that would ensure their safety. So for example, I could have somebody who is ambulating with a device, and even with my assistance, under both conditions, there is risk to the patient falling. They're shuffling their feet, they're shaky, I have a gait belt on them. Even under that condition, that's not necessarily a safe condition for walking, and that person can be considered chair fast. The same thing can be said about other 1800s, which we'll speak about as we go through the modules. But the takeaway here is that you do not score them on what they can do, You score them on where you would place them to be safest at a current level of function. And we will illustrate this as we go through the modules. Assistance is defined as several things, not just physical, which is often forgotten. It's also verbal and also any type of setup of the environment in order to help that patient complete the task. So even a single verbal cue is assistance in grabbing a device or helping them set up their wheelchair is considered assistance, so that must be considered. When some patient has an inability that varies over a period of time, or they use two different modes for ambulation, one with a cane, one with a walker, you're going to choose the one that they can do greater than 50% of the time and the one that provides them the best safety. This 50% rule doesn't apply, though, to defining chair fast or bed fast, which we'll discuss in other modules. And when we're assessing patients, it can take a combination of both interview and direct observation in order to score them properly. Some additional considerations are the assessment is being performed and looked at over a 24-hour time frame, that you really need to observe the patient doing these activities of daily living. If that's not appropriate, you can certainly do screening tests, such as having the patient reach down to touch their feet, reaching across their midline to get an idea of how their range of motion is and how they can physically perform activities if they had to, for example, remove a shirt over their head. Remember that you want to go to the rooms that the patients are doing the tasks and such, if it's grooming or bathing activities, in the bathroom. If you're doing a toileting activity, you want to make sure you do that in the bathroom. Transfers should be done from several locations, but the bedroom is going to be the initial location to start with. And as far as ambulation goes, you want to make sure you look at all surfaces, both indoors and outdoors. Remember that the focus of the question is looking at the patient's ability to perform the task, not their willingness. Now, what does that really mean? Well, willingness can be interpreted as the person can perform, but they choose not to. Inability means they want to, but can't perform the task. So keep in mind that in many examples we'll look at as we go through the 1800s, that if someone is unwilling to do the task, but has the ability to do it, you assess it on their ability, not their choice. Remember, ability can be affected by physical restrictions, sensory impairments, cognitive or emotional issues, and looking at environmental barriers, in particular in homes, can be very important at affecting the patient's abilities. In conclusion, remember that the 1800s are always to be scored before any interventions have occurred. Remember, safety is integral to ability. So if the patient isn't safe, you can't say they are able. Remember, when choosing a score, you're going to score the patient based on what would represent their current safest level of function. If you have any questions, contact your rehab manager or speak to the Director of Clinical Services in your branch. Thank you.